No one tells the truth about daily driving a Toyota Land Cruiser 70 Series. I thought I knew exactly what I was getting into, but after owning a Land Cruiser, there are a few things that I would change and things I would do differently next time. So, without further ado, here are the real pros and cons of daily driving a Toyota Land Cruiser 70 Series. Welcome back to the Forrest Outdoor Adventure YouTube page. If you're new here, my name's Forrest. I'm a full-time bike mechanic, truck builder, and outdoor adventure seeker, and this is my 1985 Toyota Land Cruiser HZJ 74. So this is the HZJ 74 series Toyota Land Cruiser, meaning it has two doors and it is the diesel engine. So this truck has a 5-speed manual transmission, Toyota solid axles front and rear. It also has 33-inch Maxxis Razor MT tires, and I've done a couple other really interesting things to this guy since owning it. Now, being that this is a Japanese imported vehicle, it also is right-hand drive, which makes it really unique here on the roads in the United States. Everyone says it's impossible to get these vehicles registered in California, so ask me how I did it. But at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of the import information I've learned, and maybe you guys can get a little bit of a deeper reflection as to what it takes to actually register one of these vehicles in California. Because there's a lot of people that says it's impossible, but I've got California plates on here and we did not have to register out of state. The Toyota Land Cruiser is known for extreme reliability. This vehicle is known as a million-mile vehicle. Pretty much every Land Cruiser across the board is known to be one of the world's most reliable vehicles. That being said, this is a JDM import, so some parts for the interior as well as the body are very tricky to find. However, the 70 series is still in production as of today, which makes the parts attainable. They're just tricky to find in the United States. However, all of the running gear underneath, wheels, tires, axles, everything like that is virtually exactly the same as the Toyotas that were released in the American market. The first thing I really liked when shopping for these Land Cruisers was they come with a Toyota solid axle. Under the front of the Land Cruiser, you're actually going to find a solid Toyota axle from 1985, and you're also going to find swivel hubs. Now, there's mixed reviews on the swivel hubs. Some people don't like them because they're known to leak diff fluid, but I really enjoy them because they're known for ultra reliability, and this is one of the strongest front ends you can put on a four-wheel drive. Another pro I really enjoy about this vehicle is that the engine bay is very open and everything is super easy to get to. If you have to change belts, a water pump, any hoses, anything like that, super easy to get to when you're off-road, and parts are readily available. Again, here in the United States, it is a good idea, however, to order things in advance because certain parts you do have to find online for this guy, but most things you still can go down to your local AutoZone or O'Reilly's and pick up as long as you know what to search for. So another pro with this, and not so much the vehicle itself, but it's actually the tires. Now I have just upgraded to a Maxxis Razor MT 33-inch tire. They are a 6-ply tire, but they're really good off-road, and they're one of the stickiest tires I've ever owned. It feels like this vehicle will literally crawl up anything in first gear, 4 low. You don't even have to touch the throttle. It will literally walk next to you over obstacles like it is nothing. It is actually insane. And that brings me to the next thing, and the tires being a 33-inch, that gives us really good fuel economy with the diesel engine. I have heard people complain if you go 35s on these Land Cruisers, the fuel economy does drop dramatically even after you re-gear because they are just a 4-cylinder turbo diesel. Now, the turbo diesel is still really good and very efficient, and I do enjoy that engine a lot, but I don't know that I would go over a 33-inch tire. Now, that could be a con if you're looking to go extremely long distances, getting really good mileage. You might want to go with an engine that's a little bit larger than what came factory in these guys. But at the time and for our purposes, the 33s fit just fine with our overland lifestyle. We do a lot of mine explorations where the trails are very, very skinny, almost like UTV side-by-side trails. This thing fits right in there with those because it is so skinny and so small. I've got another square body Chevy Suburban that's truly just an absolute behemoth. It's massive. So getting this was a huge improvement over that and allowed us a lot more access to those super skinny side-by-side mine trails. Also, the other thing I was going to mention, a lot of times when we go out on these mining adventures where we live here in California, it's very hot. And this diesel engine has shown absolutely no signs of overheating at all. This is one of the coldest running diesel engines I think I've ever experienced. And that's great for those off-road trips where you're out in Death Valley or those environments where it's just extremely hot and dry. You can run this thing all day long, idle it however hot you want, push it as hard as you absolutely can. Trust me, I've tried, and I have not been able to get this thing to overheat at all. Now that we've talked about lots of the pros, I would like to chat about some cons with this vehicle. Now, my number one beef that I have with this vehicle doesn't have to do with anything small like you would think, daily driver issues, anything like that. It's actually the electrical. The electrical system, being that it was made in Japan, is 24 volts. This being a 24 volt system is amazing for other countries that run in 24 volt constantly. But here in the United States, everything we have is 12 volts. So if I want to hook up a winch, a light bar, a fridge, anything like that, overland setup style, I have to run through a 24 to 12 volt converter, which could be a big problem if you're just trying to plug in simple things. I've already got a converter installed in this truck, and that's something I did know I was going to have to do going into this project. But it is something to note if you're going to get into the Land Cruiser game, especially JDM import. Note if it's a 12 or a 24 volt. Next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of the drivability and daily drivers. The first thing I'll say, driving this thing every day through stop and go traffic can get a little bit rough. Freeways are great, don't get me wrong, but the con here is in the stop and go traffic, especially from stoplights, this thing in first and second gear takes a really long time to get going. I'm talking upwards of probably 5 to 10 seconds at sometimes. Now, when this was made, it wasn't made in the era of electric cars and lightweight vehicles that can just zip straight off the line in 0. whatever seconds. This thing is made to go off-road. It's meant to be super heavy duty. And I think I can tell you the reason these are so reliable is because they're overly built chassis and they're very underpowered engines. An overly built chassis and an underpowered engine makes the vehicle very indestructible because it will never overpower itself, which is great if you're off-road because you have maximum torque out of the vehicle and it's never going to have too much horsepower to explode drive shafts or axles or anything like that. Other than the Land Cruiser driving like an absolute boat, which I don't mind at all, maybe you would, figured I'd throw it in as a con, is the loose steering. Now, this is fixable. The steering components on this guy are over 40 years old, so that is understandable, and it's totally a con of any old vehicle, especially 80s vehicles. But I would recommend if you're going to buy one of these, go ahead and do a steering overhaul on the front end. You'll be a lot happier, and make sure if you're going to get new tires, you have a proper alignment. This is all common knowledge. The other thing I wanted to mention, I actually have an Old Man Emu 2.5-inch lift on this guy. I would not recommend lifting these Land Cruisers over 2.5 inches. If you do that, you're going to have big problems when you try to drive in heavy wind. We actually had a big storm not too long ago here on the Central Coast, and driving this thing at 60 miles an hour down the freeway in a wind was really, really sketchy. I would even claim it was sketchier than my square body Chevy Suburban. I have done lots of things to the Suburban to make it more reliable in the wind, and that is a lot heavier of a vehicle. But if you're going to be daily driving something like this, I wouldn't recommend going higher than 2.5 inches of lift. Next beef that I have with the Land Cruiser, and you can call me soft for this, but the doors do not have stoppers. Now, I don't know if they're just worn out or what exactly is going on, but if you park this vehicle on a hill and you go to open the door, well, it'll stop like this when it's out, but there's not enough force there to actually stop this when it's on a hill. That being said, a lot of newer vehicles have that. I put this door open, and I just had barely got it propped up the other day and got my head stuck in between the door and the body right there, and the door came closed behind me and absolutely cracked the top of my forehead. You could call me kind of dumb for that. I knew it was a possibility of it happening, but that is one gripe I have with these. The other gripe I have is the storage issue. Now, getting into a Land Cruiser, there's so many different versions. You have the 79 series in the truck, which I love. You have the 74 series. You have even some Land Cruiser Prados. And there is some they do make in a 4-door. This one being so good at off-road because it's a 2-door was why I wanted to get into it. But that is going to require us to have possibly a rooftop tent or some way of storing other things. Because as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and put my bike rack down like this. There is no key fob to get into this. It's all just hard locked. The other gripe I have is the storage. Oh, another pro is going to be that it has the barn doors, and the back doors do have stoppers. But as you guys can see, there isn't too much storage back there. They do give you, and I'm not sure if this is factory or not, but the cargo storage container, so when you're off-road, things do not fly forward. However, we still do have a drawer in the back, and if that wasn't there, we could get a little bit more top to bottom space. As you can see, our Yeti 45 just barely fits in there like that, and then we would have room for a couple other things, camping gear, etc. But any of our bedding, anything like that, note you will not be sleeping back there. There's way less space than even like a Jeep Sahara or anything like that. You're gonna need some sort of a rooftop tent to sleep in, or put a ground tent in the back, which is another huge factor. If you have like a family or anything like that, and safety reasons, you're not gonna be sleeping in the back of the Land Cruiser, you're gonna have to ground tent or rooftop tent. So the next con I have with this vehicle, and it's not really a con for myself, but it could be for you, so think before buying. These Land Cruisers have severely inflated in price in the last few years, the last 10 years about, and now you can go out and actually buy a brand new diesel truck for close to the same price for a nice Land Cruiser. Why would somebody want to spend the money on this? Well, here's a few reasons. They're almost considered an investment piece, and I do see people collecting these a lot. I just enjoy driving them so much, and this is my daily driver. I'm gonna beat on it the same way I would with any of my other four-wheel drives. Yes, it is my daily, so I have to do a little bit of upkeep and really keep it going. But if you're gonna buy one of these Land Cruisers, by all means, I would say, don't park it in a garage and cover it. They're meant to be driven hard, outdoors. Just drive. What are some other reasons that somebody would want one of these? Well, it's pretty much no electronics in this vehicle. And when I say no electronics, I don't mean you have a big screen, there's no computer that runs the engine, it's all mechanical. It's almost like one of our old Cummins pickup trucks. There's no computer that runs the engine, it's just starter power and that's it. For me, I really like that because I like the usability of just being able to run like one USB port. There's no big screen, no big radio, anything like that. There's a small radio in there, but everything's very minimalistic, and honestly, it's pretty nostalgic. I enjoy driving this thing around every day, pretending like I'm living in the 1980s when times were simple. A couple more cons you might think of, and I know it seems like a lot of cons, but there's also a pro to everything. This thing smells. If you're gonna stop at like a stoplight or a drive-through, and you're just gonna sit there and idle, the windows are gonna have to be rolled down, and there is no AC. So on a hot day, it is a little bit brutal having to roll the windows down to keep the smell out of the cab. That's kind of just a factor of old diesels though. We own a lot of old diesels and they pretty much all do the same thing. I think theoretically you could completely seal off the cab and probably get rid of the smell and probably even retrofit with AC if you wanted to. But just note, if you're gonna buy an old diesel, really anything, it's probably gonna smell a little bit at idle. It goes away when you're on the freeway though, and it's really not a problem. So being that we're here in the United States, there's one big overarching factor that's keeping the everyday person from driving one of the best trucks that was ever made. And that is what we call an import. There's one more thing I wanted to touch on before we get into how to actually import one of these trucks. Getting a diesel when it's a four-wheel drive could be a really good idea because of the fuel economy. Some of the gas trucks, such as the Land Cruisers that are in the 80 series and gas versions of the 70, get like 10 to 13 miles to the gallon when you're on the highway, which isn't amazing. This truck gets around 20, maybe a little bit more, which still is really good fuel economy for a big four-wheel drive like this. It's not as great as some brand new vehicles, but for the added reliability you get when driving one of these, I wouldn't trade it. So let's get into how to actually import one of these vehicles. The easiest thing to do would be to contact an expert because there is actually a lot of professionals that can actually help import vehicles much easier, but that can cost thousands of dollars, and you hear people telling horror stories about after they've imported a vehicle that it then costs them an exorbitant amount of extra money to do it. No, it's still going to cost a lot of money to do it. It will be worth it in the end, and I'm going to explain right now how you can actually do it on your own. If you're in California, note this process is going to be a lot harder than it would be if you were in a state that did not require an emissions inspection. So the first thing you're going to need is the certificate of Japanese import if you're doing a Japanese vehicle in particular. Basically with this certificate, that's just stating that the vehicle was fully removed from the Japanese registered vehicles list, and they're also going to take a copy of the VIN number of the vehicle. Now, you're going to want to note a few things about this before you decide to import. I would make it over 25 years old to be sure that you're safe, and it is going to have to meet all of the United States safety and emissions standards, which change per state. So it depends on what state you're importing. If you're importing into California, for example, the emission standards are much higher for this state. I know it's a total ripoff, but it is something we have to deal with. The next thing you're going to need is going to be something called a bill of landing. Now, the shipper actually takes care of this. That's just essentially declaring the vehicle has left the country you've imported it from and it's on the way to the United States, at which point they pack the whole entire vehicle down to make sure it can't be tampered with when it's on the ship coming across the ocean, and that it arrives to the United States in the exact same way that it left its home country. So the next form that you're going to need is something called the CBP 7501, and the port that's receiving the vehicle should be able to provide this to you. Essentially, that's just stating the vehicle arrived at the port legally and you actually paid all of the proper import taxes and whatnot to receive the vehicle in the United States. So there's another form that we also look for, and it's called the EPA 3520-1. Now, EPA fee meaning that's a smog certification that the vehicle has to pass in order for it to be accepted into the United States. The next form is going to be a DOT form. Now, the DOT form, HS-7, I believe it's called, is the form that essentially states the vehicle is safe for on-the-road use, and it's also 25 years or older. The next form I would recommend getting is a bill of sale from the actual seller that you bought it from in its origin country. This helps a lot when it's going through customs and you're filing all the paperwork through your local DMV. So, with that being said, you're almost done with your import process. The last thing to do would be to collect a bill of sale from the original owner or whoever you're importing it from in Japan. And then just think about if you're going to be taking the vehicle across state lines here in the United States. You are then going to need a VIN inspection if you're taking it across any state lines from the port of entry that it came into, from your local highway patrol, and they're also going to check your emissions system. Here in California, we have an extremely strict emissions system, so this vehicle has been ran through 100% and is fully legalized here in California with the California title, which is very rare for Land Cruisers. A lot of these guys you find registered out of state, meaning states that do not have emissions requirements. So with all that being said, why would somebody want to go through all the hurdles to own a vehicle like this? Well, in my opinion, it's just truly rad. It's very nostalgic to own a vehicle like this, and it feels amazing every single time that you hop in the driver's seat. It will be worth all the paperwork that it takes to get a vehicle like this going. The other way to jump through the hoops very quickly is purchase the vehicle from someone who did all the work for you. Now, just note that is why in the United States, the price of these vehicles is extremely high, because that registration process and importing is a very high cost.
A con I do have is I don't know how to drive it because it is right-hand drive, and I do know manual, but I've never driven on the right-hand side, so maybe that's something I should learn to do. Comment down below if I should learn how to drive this monster.
As you guys can see, we are out of the bike shop and it's almost summertime here in the States. We are going to be taking this Land Cruiser out on a ton of overland adventures. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Should we put a rooftop tent on it? Should we lift it higher? Should I put a fridge in the back? With all that being said, I really appreciate you guys watching and sticking with the channel. This has been a really fun video to make, and we will see you guys next week.
Please subscribe to the channel so he can take me on lots of adventures this summer. Because I'm ready. I'm ready to go.